Have you ever had to sit down and consciously think about what makes a game fun or valuable? Because now is the time to start. Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun, Dai here, and today it's time to talk about predatory gaming monetization schemes and how Fate Grand Order fits into the whole gacha lootbox gambling debate being addressed worldwide. For a long time, the free-to-play model with microtransactions has been accused for preying upon the wallets of gamers, many of whom form addictive behaviors as a result of a game's design. But only more recently has it been taken to court. The UK had a hearing with perhaps the worst offender, Electronic Arts, in which the company tried to defend its use of loot boxes by likening them to surprise mechanics seen in mystery children's toys, such as Kinder Eggs.
Do you consider loot boxes to be an ethical feature of your games?
Well, first, we don't call them loot boxes. I think that was...
Whatever term you wish to apply to them, do you consider them ethical?
So what we look at as surprise mechanics.
Okay, yeah, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. There is amusement to be had in being surprised, in deriving enjoyment from getting something you want from a lottery. However, for every moment of fulfillment, there's an equal or excessive amount of anxiety that comes from not getting what you want. And that anxiety can be harnessed by game companies in ways that toy makers can only dream of. I won't say that we need big governments to step in and deem these things illegal, or to regulate them perchance, but I most definitely think we players need to be abundantly aware of these practices, and disciplined enough to avoid them. Thankfully, nearly all of the scummy business tactics in question have been compiled into a single presentation called Let's Go Whaling, which is like a TED Talk from hell, teaching fellow developers how to upsell gamers at every turn.
But I'll leave the morality of it out of the talk. We can discuss it if we have time later.
Now, I love Fate Grand Order. I really do. But I'd be lying if I said I loved all of it, or that the game isn't immune to the same criticism. I definitely think FGO gives a lot of bang for its buck, but that doesn't excuse Delightworks and Type Moon from being called out on their business model. Thus, we'll take a look at this presentation and look at each tactic mentioned to see just how many of them are utilized in our beloved game. Afterward, I'll give my own take on just what makes Fate Grand Order a special experience worth playing within moderation. That way, both sides of the issue can be covered, so you all have lots to discuss in the comments. Let's get started.
This is to remind you that a lot of the spend comes from the high-paying guys, the whales.
So he starts off introducing us to the concept of a whale, a minority of a game's player base that contributes most of its revenue. We'd like to think such whales are rich folks who have plenty of money to spare, so that the game stays afloat and we don't have to worry about contributing as much. A guy named Daigo, who spent over $70,000 on the game, was covered by the Wall Street Journal. He lives with his parents, but looking at the sheer amount of tech in his house, as well as his impressive figure collection, it's clear to tell the guy is well off. Apparently, he makes good money from trading stocks, and he enjoys funneling that income into the game. We don't necessarily get to see the dark side of his obsession, if there is one, so he's a more positive, if still not outrageous, example of a whale. He's certainly not the standard, though. People who whale on games are typically average people with meager income, living off of hourly wages. They are people who don't come into the game intending to spend as much money as they ultimately do, because of the game's sales tactics. Fate Grand Order has its own fair share of whales, the most famous of whom was a Japanese streamer who spent over 600,000 yen, or roughly $6,000, to roll a total of 5 Skahak servants in order to max out her noble phantasm. While I'm not much of a whale myself, I'm sure my viewers are familiar with other streamers and YouTubers who don't have stable jobs and have poured way more money than they probably ought to into the game. And those are just the ones we get to see. That said, Fate Grand Order isn't what I'd call a pay-to-win experience. Rarer servants are certainly powerful, but they aren't necessary to experience the wealth of story being offered. Between freely earned Saint Quartz, Friend Point summons, and command seals, most players should be able to complete all the events and singularities with a fair amount of challenge. In its favor, the amount of grinding a player has to do is pretty extensive regardless of what servants they have, The time investment is mutual. Nah. What attracts FGO whales is, of course, the emotional connection we have for the characters. We don't just want to win, we want to do so with our favorite servants, many of which we grew to love through other Type Moon works. As such, the game can be better described as pay-to-waifu, where the most popular and beloved characters are strategically made to be the rarest. But we'll come back to that. For now, let's just take notice of the fact that the first time FGO ever fell from the top-played gaming board in Japan, all Delightworks had to do to get back to its #1 spot was introduce a new story, with a batch of stunning waifu.
I've seen suggestions to model what you sell according to bartle types. I assume you're all familiar with bartle types.
People play Fate Grand Order for various reasons. Clearly, one of the wonderful things about the game is its massive popularity, which comes with a diverse community of players who all share in the collective passion. You don't have to succeed at the game, or even get your favorite servants, in order to partake in the enjoyment. Others play the game for meme damage, to challenge themselves against the game's mechanics. It's not a competitive experience, so said players are fighting their own personal battles against the AI. Others want to read the story, which is thankfully very accessible to all players. With this considered, it's nice to know that, beyond monetization, the game genuinely has a lot of actual game to enjoy that has nothing to do with microtransactions.
The hook is what gets you into the game to try out a free-to-play game. Then you build it into a habit that you play multiple sessions every day. And then at the end, it's the hobby phase where people see it as one of their main hobbies, and they put lots of time and resources into it.
What Fate Grand Order does want you to do is become a habitual player who feels invested in the game for the long haul. Hook, Habit, Hobby is a means of building this investment. The various gacha banners attract new players, who can, if they don't get the servant they want, reinstall the game for another chance at rolling their first batch of quartz. With enough persistence, any player can start the game with a good hand, but once you've gotten your favorite servant, and begin to level them up and progress through the story, the chance to re-roll goes away. No one servant is worth restarting and negating all the progress you've made, especially if you already put down money on the game. Thus, the only way to keep getting the new servants and content is to continuously log in day after day. The AP system encourages players to stop playing and return in a day's time. Events spread themselves out over time, so you can't just spam it all in one go. Recharging command seals encourage players to stop after taking on a troublesome boss. The login bonuses and rewards, resetting mana prism shops, free daily friend point summons. All of these are designed to get us to spend at least a moment every single day with the game in our minds. The end stage of this is people who naturally take the game and its daily grind with pleasure, as a hobby. The presentation talks about selling different things to different stages in the process, but thankfully FGO dodges most of this. As a hobbyist of the game, I don't feel any more exploited than a first-time player.
Gachas, who hasn't heard of gachas?
Fate Grand Order is very self-aware in recognizing that gacha is bad civilization. Jokes aside, there is something very predatory about gacha and lottery-based mechanics. Unlike DLC, where a player is encouraged to spend extra money for a piece of in-game content, gacha systems deny players the chance to outright buy what they want at a fixed price. Instead, they have to win their content via random chance. It's exciting and frustrating at the same time. We're drawn in by the idea that, at any moment, we are just one roll away from what we want. But because it's never guaranteed, we just have to keep rolling until we get it. This keeps us in a "just one more, I'm so close" mentality that, sadly, is an illusion developers call the hot state. Now that you're emotionally compromised by being denied what you want, you'll be far more likely to pursue it despite the cost. While I've had great success getting the 5-star servants I want by utilizing rate-ups, staying active with events, logging in every day, and saving any bit of free quartz I can, I've also seen my entire stockpile plummet, with nothing of value to show for it. And the instant you have to start buying quartz, the dollars add up fast. To overcome this psychological trap, players can go online to fan-made summon simulators, where they can see just how rare getting a specific servant can be, and what it would cost you.
People are much more attached to the stuff they have than an equal amount of things that they can gain.
Next, we get into loss aversion, Essentially, we're given a taste of what we could have, but have that content stripped from us if we don't pay up. When Fate Grand Order releases a new servant, we often get the chance to use them temporarily in the story, or through a trial quest. This serves to gauge whether we actually want a specific servant or not, but it also shows us what we're missing out on. The game's support feature is absolutely brilliant, one of the best parts of the game from a design perspective, but it too can tempt players. Damn, if only I had my own Merlin.
You see the goblin going with his clocks, tick-tock. I'll take it away from you, I'll take it away from you. They are scarce, they go away. This is a brilliant way to get more.
Many things in Fate Grand Order are time-sensitive. Many events require you to have played a certain part in the main story to access them. The events themselves are quite extensive and demand your attention during their run. These aren't so bad, and often make the game more engaging. But banners, on the other hand, those are evil. By offering specific servants and their raid-ups for a limited time, players are pressured to spend money. When you're down on quartz, there's very little you can do in a short time to replenish it. Many of the servant banners only show up once or twice a year, and prey on your anxiety that, if I don't get it now, I may never get it at all. Thus, either you get lucky and roll the servant you want with free quartz, or you find yourself squeezing every last bit you can from your own wallet.
Stuff that we put work into, we value more highly.
When we finally get a servant we want in FGO, we feel great. We treat that servant like our baby, our love, our life, by pouring all of our Ember cards, mats, and grails into maxing them out. We then play them extensively to develop bond points and establish a sincere connection with the character. These features let us fuel our love and value a rolled servant more than a borrowed support because of the work we put in. Thus, while we can still use our favorite servants via the support system, we're still encouraged to roll for our own versions.
When we don't know the price of stuff, the first price we hear suggested for it becomes our anchor, and then we compare everything to that.
This is perhaps the most important of all. For all the time and money we pour into gathering these servants, just how valuable are they, really? I think all great games deserve to be purchased, and FGO has given me continued entertainment for over 2 years now. Thanks to this, I don't feel bad spending money on the game. But how much is appropriate? A $60 game like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 can provide hundreds of hours of brilliantly executed, engaging content. Furthermore, when you buy it, you know you're getting all of the advertised characters. If you buy Fate Extella Link, you know you're getting Artoria, and all the other servants on the cover or in trailers. Since that's not the case in FGO, you have to buy quartz, and the purchase page for quartz can be quite nefarious. In reality, bulk buying is a great thing, since it saves on packaging, shipping, and generally garners continued business between manufacturer and client. But it gets weird when it comes to digital goods that have no inherent distribution cost. FGO encourages us to buy quartz in bulk by cutting us a deal. The more we spend, the more valuable our dollar is, thanks to the bonus quartz we earn on larger purchases. Since we don't know when we'll get our beloved waifu, we're forced to think of getting the most efficient use of our dollar, which in FGO's scale is a staggering $80. Is a single character in the game even worth that? Especially when entire games filled with characters run for cheaper. Langrisser is one of those cases. The mobile game is stingy with giving out its coveted female characters, but if you really want them, a guaranteed option exists with the re-release of Langrisser 1 and 2. Sure, that $80 helps support the game's development and overall success, but it's not like gacha is the only way to support the devs. There are plenty of well-made Fate figures I could purchase with that same money. For the same price as an in-game character, such as Skahak, which is essentially just a PNG file you can find online anyway, you can buy a gorgeous, tangible figure, wall scroll, dakimakura, shirt, or any number of things using that same picture. That's not to mention the sheer amount of food and living expenses one can cover with those same funds. Yet, when it comes time to buy the quartz, we're tempted to fork out the cash, because it looks like a better deal.
The socially accepted way of behaving in your game should be paying.
FGO is a perfectly playable game for free, but that doesn't mean players aren't paying up. The devs naturally want us to feel the best way to play the game is to spend money on it. When we go to select our support servants, we get to see all the cool servants our friends managed to roll, which reinforces the idea that spending is good, and that these servants are attainable. If everyone else is using 5 stars, why aren't you? Is it fair for you to use someone else's rare servant when you yourself have none to offer in return? Again, I genuinely feel the support system is great. It lets us still use servants we weren't able to roll, which severely lessens the pain of not getting a certain servant. But that doesn't mean it's perfect.
Remember, there are 4 ways of progressing in games in general. You can have a skill-based game, you can have a luck-based game, you can have a game where you just progress by grinding, or you can pay to progress.
The last tactic I want to talk about is how games manage the relationship between grind and pay. As I've said before, no matter how skilled the player, no matter how rare their servants, Fate Grand Order has a lot of grindy elements. Grind can be annoying, or relaxing depending on the player, but it's nice to know that all players are in for the same experience. I've never felt encouraged to pay so that I can get through the game faster. While the AP system tries to block you, and Saint Courts can recharge it instantly, if you play the crap out of events, the game gives you way more golden apples than you could possibly need, allowing you to play the game virtually as long as you want.
Make sure that your games aren't too skill-based. I made that mistake myself.
Now, the presenter says it's a bad idea to make mobile games too skill-based, but that's just insulting, isn't it? There are many ways FGO players can skillfully manage the game, circumventing its gacha problems through clever planning. And skillful play is always encouraged, while not being absolutely necessary for the base experience. What I take from all of this is that Fate Grand Order, while it certainly utilizes mechanics that suck players in and urges them to spend way more money than they should, it's quite generous compared to most other games on the platform. While not as flashy and intricate as Fate Stay Night, FGO serves as a dense visual novel with a lot of care put into the story, characters, art, and music. It supplements this with a wonderful battle system, which can get surprisingly deep, while not being so intense you can't pick it up or put it down at ease. The target of your spending is the game's characters, who all have thoughtful designs, rich backstories, and frequent involvement in the story. Furthermore, when you don't get the servants you want, you can still redeem the experience by using servants available in the story, or utilizing the servants your friends acquire. When you think of a shameless predatory mobile game, you might think of something like the first Harry Potter mobile game, which was essentially just tapping on the screen to forward a linear set of generic tasks that deplete your energy. At its core, you're just paying money for the chance to keep tapping the screen and paying more money, with hardly any skill involved. How can you even call that a game? Another question worth asking is, does Fate Grand Order have to be this way? Could the game survive under a different monetization model? Well, I think it's safe to say that if FGO were a game we could purchase up front, fewer players would get into it, since the free-to-play model is so popular. And doing so would ultimately rake in less money than the current business model. But what if they made the servants DLC? When you've got individual players willing to pour thousands into the game via gacha, it requires an extraordinary amount of one-time purchases to make up for that. There's an argument to say that it might balance out though. If we didn't have to worry about spending more than $80 on a single servant, many of us would feel more comfortable buying a greater number of servants at reasonable prices. Since it's digital, giving out more servants wouldn't incur any more cost, and everyone could be happy that way. I suppose it depends on actual buyer behavior though. I can only hope Delightworks at least researched other models. A related question is whether FGO even needs all that money. It's not the most elaborate game, from a production standpoint. Visual novels are some of the easiest games to create, and FGO's battle animations are severely lacking compared to its more modern competitors. I can't imagine the game's development costs being high enough to justify the funds it rakes in, especially when you factor in all of the merchandising and franchising that's come from the game's success. Clearly though, it does justify the need to localize the game in more countries. Many Type Moon works have been screwed over by localization, never seeing the light of day outside of Japan, without the help of fan translations. A game as profitable as FGO, however, has proven too good to ignore. It's hard to say if a more humble business model would have encouraged the game to come overseas. I can only hope that the more money that goes into the game, the more awesome Fate stuff gets made as a result, to funnel those funds into making the fandom that much larger. In summation, Fate Grand Order is a brilliant game with a passionate community that's totally worth the effort. But at the same time, I highly recommend you all play it in moderation. Never do anything in the game you don't think is fun or fulfilling. Never forget what about the game you actually enjoy. I love seeing the characters and story, but if the gacha insists on holding my favorite servants ransom, I know there are hundreds of console games out there that are offering a fuller experience for a fraction of the cost. Ultimately, don't lose track of what a game actually is. The games are there to provide you with an entertaining experience. They're not just flashy ATM machines. Also, if you haven't noticed, Fate Grand Order Arcade is absolutely gorgeous. And it's a damn shame it too relies on gacha. But even worse, it's limited to Japanese arcades. Console port when? What's your take on all of this? I really want to know. Are you free to play? If not, how much have you spent on this game? And how do you feel about the money you've spent? Do you wish the game were handled a different way? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and most of all, smashing that notification bell as if it were your waifu. That way you'll never miss out on all of my anime content, lore videos, live streams, and Holy Waifu Wars polls. My vids are struggling to get featured, so that bell is absolutely critical. If you want to support me directly, check out my Patreon, or consider donating via Super Chat. And as always, celebrate your fandom.